Hey there everyone, I just wanted to do a quick video to mark the 5th anniversary today, March 11th, of the Great East Japan earthquake. I guess it's kind of a triple disaster. It's known first of all for being one of the most, I think the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Japan. It was out at sea, but even on land it actually broke the Japanese shake scale to a number I've never even heard of before actually being realized. And it was very big here in Tokyo as well. Then of course there was the, from what I understand to be probably the worst part of the disaster for in terms of loss of life, there was the enormous tsunami that in most parts of the coast was between 7 and 10 meters. You multiply that by 3 for feet. So between 21 and 30 feet. The highest points along some parts of the coast, it was over 35 meters. It was over 105 feet tall. And you know, just washed some towns clear. And then of course there was the resulting nuclear accident at the Daiichi nuclear power plant in Fukushima, which was interesting. I still, in spite of all of the revelations that they knew it had melted down and they didn't say, and all this sort of stuff about what was going on there, I still think of the third disaster very much as a psychological event. Which I know is a little bit strange, but I think that left in many ways the most profound, it kind of messed up the whole response to the first two, and it left me, and I think I have to admit it, I mean I spent months arguing that that's not the main thing. You know, this is the main thing here is that there's been this terrible earthquake and there's been all this loss of life, and everyone's over focusing on the nuclear accident, and they're focusing on it because they're afraid to go and report the real story of the earthquake and the tsunami, which is what was first traumatizing me. But in the course of saying that's the real disaster, that frustration and that debate in itself probably ended up having perhaps the longest lasting effect on a lot of people, and I think it was, I'm not blaming the media, but it was kind of a media hype, enhanced or driven phenomenon. So yeah, I guess just for a quick reflection thing. So a lot of people are probably looking back at this time. In terms of what happened, I've got it. By the way, I actually recorded like about I think maybe 2 weeks after the event. I recorded like my first ever hour-long video, where I was actually going through everything at the time, the events as they unfolded, as I remembered at that time. And I think I told the whole story in a lot of detail. And I actually went explained a lot of stuff. It's actually still a very good video. I watched it back recently, and I think I covered it all off pretty well. But I can maybe share a little bit more than I could back then. But just again to recap. How I experienced it. So I also wanted to talk down the impact on Tokyo a lot back then. I'm more comfortable now because the thing is Tokyo didn't suffer. As you all know, Tokyo, we got a huge shake here, but we got probably the biggest shake that you could get without it being a real disaster. It was like a real serious drill. So what happened in Tokyo? We had a quake, which I think I described this before. You always know, you can kind of tell when a quake is a small quake in terms of like a small bomb going off underground, a low magnitude quake, or a high magnitude quake, like a big bomb going off, even if it's far away. Even if the shake's not very big, a really big earthquake. And I remember when the Niigata earthquake happened, we could feel it in Tokyo. It wasn't very strong here, but it felt like, it starts out like a normal quake, sort of, and then all of a sudden it changes gear, or you can feel kind of a dome. Like it changes phases, and that's to me the telltale sign of a really big quake happening. And I've felt that pattern, and then I looked up the news and I found out it was a Shindo 5 plus, destructive quake. Where it occurred in Tokyo, it was a Shindo 2 or 3. It was a tremor, but you could just tell by the duration of the quake and by the way the quake behaved. So with Tokyo, I still vividly remember experiencing the first. The main quake, which was that it was a very big tremor, which I had assumed, this must be like a big local tremor, But then it shifted gears, and then it shifted gears again. And I was expecting, given how big it was, how much the building was shaking, how much stuff was sort of swaying and stuff was falling over, which I'd never experienced before in my life. The biggest quake I'd ever felt. And I assumed it must be a very big quake, maybe very close to Tokyo. The 1923 quake that destroyed Tokyo is based in Yokohama. And this could have been that sort of distance from Tokyo, I thought. So, I did what everyone was doing, 2011, got online. And I misread the kanji. I'm embarrassed to admit, in my rush to read where it was. I saw the news flashes coming up. This quake was centered on Miyagi. I misread it as Miyazaki. Now, Miyagi is about 600 kilometers away. So to feel a quake that big, that centered that far away, is ridiculous. Miyazaki's like 1,000 kilometers away from Tokyo, and to me it was just incomprehensible. And it said immediately it's a Shindo 7. It is the top. It is the exploded upper end of the scale. Frankly, I've never heard anything more than an upper 6 before. 7 is like the catch-all, too big to be measured sort of quake. So I misread it first. I remember I tweeted, "Holy shit, that huge quake was in Miyazaki," and I remember Michaela immediately tweeted back at me, "Are you sure? I think that's a different kanji." I looked at this, oh crap, it's the same Miya on the front, but it wasn't Zaki, it was Miyagi. But then I thought, wait a minute, but that's almost as crazy as this quake being in Tokyo. Being in Miyazaki, just in terms of it's still incredibly far away and it was incredibly strong. It was being on the 29th floor of the building that I was in. I was working in a law firm at that time, and it was like being in a boat. It was huge sways. It was actually, they talked about this. It caused some. They never really planned for a scenario of what you'd call a low frequency, like a high frequency is like this, and low frequency is like this, like big, like bass kind of waveforms. Like sound waveforms. The earthquake waveform when it hit Tokyo, they're very, very big waves. And what it actually caused was, it was like rocking on a big rocking chair, and it caused these huge buildings to sway like boats, in ways that when they predict earthquakes, they think of a rattle like that, but these were actually like that, and it actually caused this kind of resonance with these buildings. It caused them to sway like crazy, and you're watching the buildings out the window, even after the quake is finished, and the buildings are just swaying a long way around, although it's a testament to how aware of the need for earthquake safety construction is around Tokyo, and the construction quality of these buildings that within Tokyo for a quake of that size. There were a couple of old buildings and there were a couple of collapses and some loss of life in Tokyo in poorly designed buildings, but compared to what you would expect, like statistically for a city that size, it was pretty remarkable how well it went. I mean, how little damage was actually inflicted. I actually so I ran out of the office. I had my Zacticam in my bag, and in the middle of the quake I actually did pull it out, and I took I wanted to take a shot of the room or something, but I realized I was shooting inside the office that I was working in, and I didn't really get a very good shot, and I kind of thought, what am I doing? And I shot like 20 seconds and I put it down again. I didn't really get anything good. I've still got the video of it, but I'm not going to show that. I've never shown that before, and it doesn't really capture anything. I know that some people who were in public places, I think Atomic Boy X in particular was like in an elevator, plus his dramatic panicking dialogue along with it went completely viral, of course, and I had that instinct that, take a video, but no, it wasn't the time or place, and I quickly changed my mind on that. But for me, it was really the event of the internet where I've written a blog about these thoughts, and I'm going to probably put the link down below rather than tell the entire story. I've told it before, but basically, it was kind of it was like hearing a nuclear bomb had gone off nearby. I mean, it was biblical, just the size alone. Before we even knew about the tsunami, before the nuclear accident, the size of the quake itself, a magnitude 9.2, which was so big, I think the original reading was like a magnitude 8.5, because it just maxed out all the instruments. It overwhelmed them. A Shindo 7, like 300 kilometers away from the epicenter out in the ocean, it was a real biblical, like disaster movie scale size quake. It was incredible, and it was hard to take in, and you get this weird sense of it's excitement. I got to be honest, it's excitement. You get adrenaline. I mean, your body reacts to emergency situations by providing you with adrenaline to give you this energy if you need to run away or whatever. And you have this, and it's kind of like, it's weird, you know, and you get pumped, or I was kind of pumped, and with this kind of nervous energy, as I'm trying to call up my wife, my son who's with my mother-in-law at home, to check that they're okay. The phone lines are not working. The phone lines are all overwhelmed because everyone's gone to the phones at the same time. Internet was the only thing that was working. All the phones were down. And then, like, immediately, all of these helicopters went into the air, and I think it was like maybe half an hour after that, there were some big aftershocks. There was some damage inside the office where I was, where I wouldn't go under the desk. A lot of people went under the desk and put their helmets on like they're supposed to. One person went under the desk and had a whole bunch of shelves, like heavy shelves, collapse onto the desk above them, and get dinged by a few of the books and so on. I mean, nothing that serious, but enough to sort of freak people out. But it was when they started showing, I think we were watching via the internet, the first waves of the tsunamis coming in. And I think they predicted originally like 3-meter tsunamis and then maybe 7-meter tsunamis, but I think they corrected to 7 meters when they saw them. 7 meters being 21 feet, being 3 stories basically. A story of a building is about 3 meters. So you're talking 2.5, 3 stories. And when these things came in, they turned out they weren't just 7. They kept coming in, and they got to be 10 meters, 15 meters, you know, in some places. And again, when you had the Indian Ocean tsunami, you were watching all this kind of tourist video came out afterwards, but this we were actually watching live. As with every earthquake, even with little teeny tiny tsunamis that come in, you can see the crest waves of these tsunamis as they come in. They always show it live on NHK, but the fact that we were watching these waves like just wash over inland and swallowing up cars and buildings, and you can see all this debris floating around, and you're watching it from a great height, but you're realizing that these are picking up cars that are driving with people in them, and there's a lot of debris there, but you're just thinking you couldn't make out people. But it was a bit like 9/11, I think, when people started to realize that wasn't just debris that was falling from those buildings, that there are people there, you know, and it kind of, you start to connect with what you're watching. Even looking at it from a distance, it sinks in for a moment. Holy crap, those are all people down there. And that's when it's, you know, even just thinking about it now, you feel very hopeless, and it's very, very sad, and you know, and you can't help but feel emotional thinking about it, just thinking that those people just didn't know they never had a chance, and how helpless it is in a way. I mean, in a way, we share the tragedy. I mean, we experienced it ourselves by being able to watch it live, but at the same time, we're also completely helpless. And I actually experienced this about 3 weeks previous, because about 3 weeks before this, there was the earthquake in Christchurch, which is where my father is from, and my grandmother and my uncle both lost their houses in that quake. And that was a similar thing. It was covered live on the internet, and there was a time there with complete chaos. And they knew that the center of the city was destroyed. I had no idea. I couldn't get through to my family or anything like that. And I spent hours just wondering if they'd even survived, and no way to figure out. But with all of this, it's funny, you could see the destruction, but you're completely helpless to know what's going on. In the old days, you'd get the news reports afterwards with a bit more information. So it was really 9/11 was probably the first sort of live mega disaster, but it was in terms of a natural disaster. And remember, this is a much, infinitely bigger scale. Those were 2 buildings. This was like 9/11 spread across, an area half the size of California. So you're in the office, and I'm trying to get in touch with my family. I'm trying to think, how do I get home? We start to hear that all the trains have stopped for safety checks. Some areas are getting power blackouts. Some parts you can see smoke on the horizon from the oil refineries around Tokyo, that one of them caught fire. And I know, again, I see that, and I think, was this like Kobe, where that whole city caught on fire after the earthquake there, and they couldn't put the fires out? It was the fires that killed everybody in Kobe. So, but again, when I'm seeing out the window, appreciating that this is hitting them first, I'm worried about Tokyo. I'm worried that, are there going to be huge fires from this? Is there going to be chaos? I eventually got through to my wife, and she was working in an area close to Tokyo Bay, so they wouldn't let her out of the building because of the tsunami warnings. They told everybody to get up onto the upper floors and to stay there until they got the all clear, which they realized might take all night. Fortunately, my son was sick, and he was at home with my mother-in-law. He wasn't at daycare. So I think I waited about 2 hours before I actually went out to walk home. I had to walk down 30 flights of stairs, and I went out again. It was like a kind of a movie scene, going out just with this massive thousands of people leaving the building. It was like society stopped. You hear about these kind of, these end of the world movies that you get, these disaster movies where all the cars are stopped and people just walking through the roads, and everybody kind of walking out. It was exactly like that. I also shot a video and recorded which of being in that situation, and you could also see the adrenaline still kind of popping behind. I couldn't help it. It was it's just a natural reaction to that. But it was just completely surreal. It was like being in one of those. I mean, you literally were in a disaster movie, and all the while knowing that look, Tokyo is in good shape, and they're not. No matter how bad it is in Tokyo, it's much worse than other places. But I'll say now as well, but Tokyo, I was pretty scared being in Tokyo as well. I was worried, mainly for the family, mainly going home, making sure everyone was okay. I walked home. My sister-in-law couldn't get home, and so she was actually working near our house at that time. She came to stay, so I spent the night at home with my son, my mother-in-law, and my sister-in-law. And my wife had to sleep at work. A lot of people had to sleep in their offices, actually, or they got stuck between offices and going home. Where they slept in train stations overnight, things like that, and a lot of people just gave up and decided to walk, and they walked, like, if you've got a 1 hour commute, that's about a 12-hour walk, and a lot of people walk 12, 14, 15 hours home, and a lot of people really messed up their legs doing that. A lot of people got injured doing that. So that was like day one, and and then the second, that was the first and the second disasters, I suppose, and I really experienced I guess I experienced the first one. I experienced the quake, but not the tsunami, although I kind of indirectly experienced the tsunami, as everybody who could see the internet in those days could. The next day, I still remember vividly the sequence that we found out about the nuclear accident. NHK put on a news flash at about 10 a.m. And they said, newsflash, TEPCO is going to be holding a news conference at midday, but it's with regards to this picture that you can see from the Fukushima Daiichi facility. Here you can see this shot taken 8 a.m. yesterday, where you can see all 4 reactor buildings prominently there. Whereas the photo from this morning, one of the buildings is missing. There are only 3 reactors there now. There was like one that disappeared. They didn't show the actual the video, which later came out of that building exploding. And with the hydrogen explosion, it was just a remote photo which just was taken probably on a time thing, and they just noticed one of the nuclear reactors is apparently vaporized and gone missing. And when I saw that, I turned to my wife and I said, well, I get the feeling this is going to be more serious than we thought it was, so how about I rush up to the supermarket now and get water, get some supplies. My wife said, don't be irresponsible. If everybody rushes the supermarkets, just panicking at this without knowing all the facts, society's going to come to an end. Wait for the news announcement and decide. And I did. We waited till the 12 o'clock announcement, where the government announced that yes, there had been an accident at the nuclear power plant. They're trying to figure out what was going on, but dude, one of the reactors is missing. These things don't fall off the backs of trucks. So I kind of turned around and said, okay. They confirmed it's gone. Can I go to the supermarket now? My wife looked at me and she said, yeah. So I went outside. As I left the building, there were some foreigners living in the building. I remember I was overtaken as I left the entrance by these very brightly, all of this kind of bright North Face sort of all weather gear and backpacks. Very tall. So they looked stereotypical Dutch or Germans. Full body gear, full backpacks, running out of the building, and I saw them go to the end of my street. Left was towards the supermarket and right was to the main road and to the airport, and they were all turning right. I turned left and went to the supermarket. The supermarket, by the time I got there, all the water was gone. And I actually, as I can say now, I called up Victor. I said, hey dude, could you please pop up to the nearest supermarket and just get a box, 6 2-liter bottles of water, and could you just go and get one of those and quietly post it to me, just so that we have it, and without hesitation. I mean, he's a good mate. It's say no more, done. Even though I think he was still asking, so what's going on there? I'm like, I don't know, but yeah, supermarkets are emptying out here. I didn't want to broadcast that. There was some people sort of overhyped that, oh look, on the Saturday how all the supermarkets and convenience stores were going bare in Tokyo. They were here and there, it wasn't everywhere, but there was a rush on the supermarkets immediately after that announcement. And yeah, I couldn't find water, so Victor was very good, he got that for me. They sold out pretty soon in Nagoya as well. And then we spent a very long time trying to figure out, we had to make a call ourselves. My wife had an obligation to be at work, which she couldn't abandon. We didn't take the decision to stop working lightly. So we had this thing on Monday, what do? Do we evacuate temporarily? Do we stay? Most foreigners evacuated, even temporarily, some even to West Japan. Anyone with family in West Japan moved their family over there, and a lot of foreigners just moved their Japanese families overseas. We thought about that, but again, my wife insisted because of the nature of her work as well, was busy as a result of this accident. So I kind of told her, okay, if people at your work start disappearing, we're going to go. But we kind of thought we would play it more by ear. But when I got back to work on the next Monday, my work was about half Japanese lawyers and half American lawyers. By about midway through that week, there was only one other guy there with family who's still in Tokyo. Everyone else had gotten their families out. And frankly, just about all the expats had disappeared, even just temporarily. They came back, but they were taking their families overseas. I was talking with this other guy, I was like, well, why didn't you move anyone out? And he said, well, all my family's in Tokyo, I've got nowhere outside of Tokyo to go. And frankly, that was the situation with my in-laws as well. They were all exactly the same, Tokyo people. So, the choice for me was, my wife quits her job and leaves the country, or, you maybe go and stay in a hotel in Osaka, which some people did, but no, that wasn't something that we thought we wanted to do. So, we kind of stayed and were watching, and it was, then the panic started. I played rugby for a French rugby team. The French went into the biggest panic, which I found, kind of cynically ironic, given how they are the most nuclearized country in the world in terms of power stations. If you feel that uncomfortable with nuclear power, I dealt with some very, very unpleasant, very hysterical people who wanted to save my life by encouraging me violently to leave. And the stress of that, the stress of the worried family, the stress of people who couldn't understand the information that was all coming out in Japanese, and the information was coming out in English 24 hours late, and it had been through a copy edit room where it was being spun and sensationalized to play, this could be the worst disaster, this could be everyone in Tokyo is about to die. And it's easy to play up the story like that, I think, when you're remote from it. I don't think that the press would have reported about it so irresponsibly if the disaster had taken place in London or New York. They would be thinking about quality information and keeping everyone calm. But when it happens in a more exotic location like Tokyo, or if it happened in Delhi or Libya or something like that, they want the Michael Bay version, and that's what was coming out of most news outlets, including news outlets that I have a lot of respect for, or I had a lot of respect for, like BBC, which I found kind of very disappointing and very frustrating. And they were flying people over who, and again, I was kind of like, well, they were flying people over who were reporting about the nuclear accident from Osaka and from West Japan, because they were afraid to go to Tokyo. I was in Tokyo. Tokyo was fine. It was actually, less radiation in Tokyo, far less radiation in Tokyo than actually on the airplanes flying out of Japan. But these people were afraid to go up into Tohoku to actually cover the actual earthquake and the tsunami, because they were afraid that everything up there was sort of contaminated. And everyone was believing the worst case scenarios that were being sought out and published through the media. And that being broadcast was causing panics within the expat community within Japan, which caused rumors to actually come out of the expat community, which startled the Japanese community, which then the government was realizing, no, we need to figure out how to disperse English information as well, because it's causing false rumors. But it turned into a real, the best way I can describe it, I think it's still the way I described it at the time, was when you hear about like a civil, like Syria, like the civil war, or in Libya, and they say, well, the Civil War, there's a lot of fighting happening in these cities, but the people in this city, they can hear on the horizon, shell fire and gunfire, but it hasn't actually come to the city, so everyone is very nervously waiting to see if it will come. And that's kind of how it felt. It felt like being, I never really appreciated what that must be like before, but we weren't in a war zone. Tokyo wasn't being evacuated, it wasn't being irradiated per se, or it had a few had a few moments, but it was like everyone was waiting there, waiting to find out, is the war going to come here? Are our lives going to be in danger or not? And some people weren't willing to take the risk and were running out early, just like people who maybe leave a war zone early. And some people were sitting tight, and I can kind of understand. You watch TV, well, why would you stay in a city, which you were like all these cities in Syria that have been destroyed? Why would you sit there and wait for the war to come? But it's not an easy decision to uproot, and you have to make that based on good information. And that's what there was a real shortage of. The information was, people were poking fun at the Japanese information for being so kind of, stay calm and carry on. But at the same time, the Japanese who were covering and providing information had a much bigger stake in the quality of the information than the parachuted in, foreign correspondents that couldn't understand what was going on domestically. They couldn't understand the first sources of information. And I found that very frustrating. It was through that I really discovered the utility of Twitter and all these other people on Twitter who were doing what I was doing, which was taking these first sources of information and making them available in English, is converting that into English and making it available as soon as possible to try to help people who were struggling with that or were getting crappy or out of date or incorrect information from others. It is interesting, however, that of course a lot of the speculation, and it was speculation, hysterical speculation, did later prove to be true, of course, including about the meltdowns, and there was a long debate, is it really a meltdown or not? And yeah, it was a meltdown, but there again, what does a meltdown mean? You would have assumed once you hear the word meltdown that, okay, Tokyo's finished, China syndrome, all this sort of stuff, and we know that all four of them melted down, but, the degree of contamination, the area of contamination isn't what Chernobyl is, although a lot of people play up that it is bigger than Chernobyl or whatever. 3 Mile Island was right near New York, probably similar distance. In fact, I think it was even closer to New York than Fukushima Daiichi is to Tokyo. But, movies play up the idea of meltdowns being the end of the world, and that's what I was prepared for. And if the media had said meltdown, I maybe would have actually skipped the country. But I didn't. They didn't announce it. I didn't skip, even though that information was incorrect, even though people were speculating about it. I stayed. And, Tokyo, for lots of reasons, a lot of the hysterical predictions about, the impact on people on Tokyo. In the end of the day, the biggest impact, the biggest cause of death from the nuclear accident was not from radiation, it was from stress. It was from the stress of relocation, it was from the stress of needing to leave their houses, it was from, a lot of suicides, a lot of people dying alone, there was a lot of disruption to lives. But, and there was a lot of media which acted in a way which sought to ramp up that, to make it more exciting, to make it more like a movie. Which changed my perception on all this sort of thing a lot. But we're still dealing with the fallout of that today. And in terms of the way that I experienced it, thinking of that as a drill for what the real big thing in Tokyo is going to be, when we have power cuts, when you have the train stopping, when you have a huge earthquake, when you have to have all these plans for how you're going to get home. And the fact that that's a near certainty. We've had these regular quakes, half the distance between Miyagi and Tokyo, that have been happening on the same spot over and over in North Ibaraki, which implies that this moving down, that the tension that got released up north has now been shifted further south along the fault line. It almost seems to me just an obvious certainty that we're going to experience the same quake probably happening closer to Tokyo next time, and maybe even directly across from Tokyo or in Tokyo. Tokyo's on these fault lines. So it was a good mental preparation for what that's going to be like. It took a lot of the imagination and guesswork out of what a quake's going to be like. And the upside of that is I think Tokyo is, going to be a lot better prepared for it when it happens, although it's going to be super tough when it does happen. It changed my perception of the media. It changed me a lot. It really, a lot of people really do reveal their characters in that sort of circumstance of high stress and high panic. And you know, a lot of people that I still follow and I respect a lot, particularly through Twitter. I became aware of them through this event and the way that they behaved. And there's a lot of people that I completely lost a lot of respect for through this whole thing as well. And a lot of organizations that I really lost respect for. I lost a lot of faith in Western media and the way that news is put together. Maybe I've recovered some of that now. I'm not as deep. I was deeply cynical for a long time after that. Although even now I don't find a single source of news to really be completely trustworthy anymore, actually, about reporting anything, which is a shame. You know, there's a huge market for reliable news, objective news, and you know, there are sources that I thought were still that, although they were becoming a declining market. But it really changed my perception of people and the world and the way that I look at things. You know, it reminded me, I think, that, you know, things are, don't get attached to things. You know, things are transient. You know, you think that so if you survive the tsunamis, which everybody saw, you know, where those houses in their entirety in an instant were completely washed away, it's not sad that you lost your house. You know, it's a joy that you survived. I mean, for as tough as it is to even then survive a situation like that, you know, life is it. Right? You know, you don't rush into the house to go and get your favorite, you know, video game or something like that. You get all your family and your loved ones out, and you know, and just be prepared in life to know that we like to think that we're in control, but you know, we're not. We live in a world that, you know, Mother Nature absolutely has the upper hand, and we live on Mother Nature's terms, and nothing. You're not reminded of that anywhere more than in Japan. I think that plays into the psyche in a positive way of the Japanese people. I think that people here really do respect the impermanence of things and the kind of place in the world. Maybe more. I think maybe Westerners are a little bit arrogant in the way that we look at the world, and that gets shown up, you know, when we have disasters as we have in New Zealand and so on. So yeah, you know, a lot of friends became better friends. A lot of people. I developed huge respect for so many people, and I discovered this community of people, maybe like myself, you know, like-minded people who kind of look at the world the same way. I became very savvy on how to discover and filter and use information. For me, Twitter is like, I know Twitter's in decline at the moment, but you know, Twitter just proved to me to be the best thing ever as a result of this. Really changed my perspective on life. I'm sure it left me slightly traumatized, as it still is. Changed my outlook a lot, but at the same time, I think it's a good thing in the end of the day to be thoughtful and humble, and you know, self-aware of where you are, as this did. You know, and as I constantly said throughout the crisis at the time, I'm only coming to it now because I talked about this all the time when it was actually happening. The disaster, you know, it was an incredible earthquake and loss of life. You know, just as an event, it's without parallel to anything that you can think of, actually, that I can think of in the 20th century, for all the horror that happened in the 20th century. You know, for instantaneous events. So, you know, it's a day to, even if you didn't directly lose anyone that you know there, I mean, you know, it is a day to reflect on, I mean, when 25,000 people die, that is, or, you know, disappear, those people all have families and friends and connections. I mean, that affects, you know, millions of people directly, you know, and indirectly it affects, you know, billions. So it's a very, you know, it's a sad day for a lot of people, as it will continue to be for a long time. But I think it's also a good day just to reflect and to remember, you know, in the end of the day, you know, what you build up around you is not what you build up around you. It's, you know, it's the person that you are, and the person that you are is the person that you are when you're most tested. You know, when you're under these sort of situations, and you have to think, what am I going to do when this happens? Anything could happen at any time, and you know, In a way, I feel kind of lucky to have been able to experience this in a relatively safe way once myself, but also to know that it's going to happen again. And just remember what's really important. It's people. It's always people. It's stuff doesn't matter. It doesn't. It's nice, but it doesn't matter. Stuff can be replaced. People can't. So just I value it as a day to remember the importance of the people around me that I respect and that I love, and how important those people are, and how beyond all of our control these things can change suddenly. And to think about, what are you going to do when this sort of thing comes to you? So a lot to ponder, a lot to remember. It's a very, very sad day. My thoughts and condolences go out to everyone who actually directly suffered loss in that tragedy, and many other tragedies like it that have happened. And be prepared, and just spend it's worth spending a moment just to think about just what this should remind us of, what's really important. That's what I'm going to take from this day, and I hope that's what you guys do too. So stay cool, and see you again on Tokyo Tonight on the weekend. Okay, peace.